really pick up on the presentation that Hannu's just done, and we're going to look at, the next 20 minutes, developing cost-effective and dedicated applications for existing and evolving TETRA networks. Just while everybody's getting seated. I guess Hannu actually needs no introduction, having just done the presentation here. We have here also Barry Hofstede, who is a consultant specialising in TETRA, and Barry's got over 10 years of experience both from an operator and a manufacturer environment, so you're seeing everything from both sides. And joining Barry and Hannu, we've got Nick Smye, who's a colleague of mine at Analysis Mason. And Nick is currently the Vice Chair of the TETRA PEI TIP Working Group. So, Barry, just start with yourself. Where do you think we are actually with current applications, and is there such a thing as a killer application for TETRA?
Yes. One killer application, well, I heard yesterday also a lot of question about the killer application. Personally, I think there is no real killer application. It's depending on the different markets. You have special needs for every market. So public safety, transport, utilities, they all have their own needs. And so one major killer application, I think it's not there. It's depending on the market, the needs. Every company has its own needs for an application.
Thank you. Nick, have you any thoughts at all on?
Yes, I mean, I think I tend to agree. I don't think there is any killer application. I think it very much depends on the sector or the user group, what they're trying to do. I can give you an example from the Norwegian project, which I'm working in at the moment. One of the absolutely key applications there is call-out. No call-out, no users, but call-out is a key application for fire and health only. Police will not use that, so I think it's very much dependent on the sector.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, Hannu, you see all of the applications that are going through, certainly through the TETRA Applications Working Group. I mean, what sort of feeling do you get from the people who are participating in terms of where the applications are coming from and what's really pushing the developers forward?
I think the successful application deployments all come from the operations. So what that specific organization needs, and they look at that carefully, then they find the killer application for their operations, their organization, and that's the thing that they really do, and then that gives a lot of benefits. But as I said, there doesn't seem to be a single thing that would fit everybody, because everybody operates in their own local way, and we have to keep that in mind in this market. But for every organization, if we look at them, we find a killer application that would be a very good chance to be the first one they could proceed with.
Okay, that's excellent. And one of the things that we're looking at is basically developing cost-effective applications. I mean, Nick, you're heavily involved with the PEI standardization process, but I guess there's probably an argument that in some ways it might be better to have application functionality on the TETRA terminal rather than on some sort of external devices which all cost money, having capex, operating expenditure and what have you. I mean, where does this sit in terms of the dilemma between external devices to the PEI and functionality actually on the terminal?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all I'd say if you can run the application in the terminal, run it in the terminal. You don't need to involve the PEI. And I must say I've been very impressed looking around the exhibition. Some of the SDS-based form applications I think are really incredible. And it's also something that you as a user or a customer can actually customize yourself. You don't have to go to an application house. So I think that's very powerful. So I think, make use of what you can on the terminal. However, there are times when you do need either the form factor is not good enough on the terminal, you want color display, bigger form, you need a keyboard, maybe there's some vehicle applications or something, and then you do need the PEI. So, I think the PEI is absolutely critical. And I think we're talking about cost-effective applications and bringing applications quickly to the market, and I think, there's been a lot of pain and probably still will be on the PEI. We started off with a number of different implementations of different manufacturers, where we now have a common PEI tip and standard. And I think once we have that in place, it makes the porting of applications between different terminals that much quicker.
Hannah, have you any thoughts on the sort of split between what you're seeing in the applications working group between those that are on the terminal and those which actually need to use the PEI?
I think we are seeing both, and there seems to be in some countries quite strong movement towards PDAs or MDTs or something, and in some other countries and organizations they look more at the handheld terminals. But I think it's kind of for the cost effectiveness, doing something on the radios you already bought and paid for is definitely a cost effective option, so that's worth looking into. But while keeping in mind that you have this flexibility, you can always connect something to your TETRA radios to use the network from a bigger device.
Yeah. Barry, do you have any thoughts?
Yes. Well, I'm also working in the application work group, and like Hannu says, we see both requirements or questions, and but like Nick says, when you can do it in the terminal, do it in the terminal.
Okay. I mean, one of the things about developing applications and putting them on the terminal is, once you've actually rolled out a network and you've got all the various terminals out and about, spread across, spread nationally, how do you go about actually pushing those applications out to the terminals? How do you do that in a cost-effective and time-effective manner? Hannu, I don't know if you want to think about that.
I think that's a very important question. So in addition of installing the application, you have to think about the life cycle, updates, and so on. And this depends on the technology you're using. In some cases, you need to do some configuration on the terminal, but in some cases, the feature on the terminal is a very generic one, so you can just upgrade the servers and you get the new functionality that way. But this is something that you need to look into, think about the long term, and also think that even if you are starting with one application, it's very probable that after your users get the one application, they will start asking for more and more. So this is also the kind of life cycle thinking, how do we plan our infrastructure and the applications so that when the users ask for more, we can provide without having to start from scratch.
I mean, where are we in terms of being able to push applications out to terminals over the air in terms of automatic refreshes and what have you?
We are working on some of the over-the-air configuration issues, but if I just take an example, WAP, which, it got a very bad name in the GSM world, but on TETRA, WAP works really nicely. You can see a lot of demos in the exhibition, and WAP doesn't have any fixed thing on the terminal. It all comes from the server, so by upgrading the server, you get the new applications in the field. And the same can be done with the Java applications on some terminals, and then some features are something that you need to configure on the terminal. But you can do that at the same time as you do your firmware upgrades. So let's say you upgrade your firmware once a year or every 18 months. You can plan your application update to happen at the same time. Then it actually doesn't add any cost or trouble.
I think it's very important. I mean, short data applications are actually not too expensive to do. I think if you talk to the various people out in the Congress and the exhibition hall, we'll find that short data applications are actually quite simple. And sometimes the majority of the cost is actually in implementing them out in the field. So, it's an important point to bear in mind, the platform that you actually develop the application on, be it WAP, Java. Barry, I mean...
Yeah, well, additionally, I think most manufacturers now also provide the possibility to update the firmware, but also the applications on the terminals when you put it in the charger. And, well, every mobile or portable radio needs to be charged, so you can do it, let's say, also in using these solutions.
Yeah. Okay. Nick, I mean, you've got a bit of experience in terms of what's going on in Norway with TED's networks being implemented. Are you seeing anything different in terms of the thoughts of the Norwegians in terms of the applications they're going to use?
I think probably not at the moment. I think more at the moment the focus is on getting in the basic TEDs and getting the basic services. And I think making use of, we've talked about SDS services and things like that, and possibly WAP. I know one of the agencies is looking at doing trials with WAP. So I think that's very much the focus at the moment. I think there is there's a clear vision that TEDs will be needed, for future applications. But at the very minute, the focus is very much on trying to get the most of what you've got at the moment.
Okay. I mean, you talk about, within TETRA, it's important for standardization to have everything, interoperable between the various terminals. But is there not a question that could be asked that if you actually have to go through a standardization process for all the various applications you're doing, that's just going to drive up costs and increase the time to market. I mean, Hannu, you look after the applications for them. What's your viewpoint on actually having applications standardized?
I think there is, if you look at the TETRA, there is always this combination. We have certain parts which are standardized and to make sure that they are interoperable so the devices work together. But then there is a lot of freedom for the manufacturers to innovate and to provide different features and to compete with each other, which is very good for the users. And I think now that applications are being used more and more, the standardization is moving slowly towards more and more this side. For example, in the call-out standard, there are already requirements for the user interface, how it should work, so that different devices alarm the user in a certain way, even if they change terminals or something. So I think we will see more of this in the future, and the applications working group is the place in the kind of the TETRA Association technical forum standardization process where we think about this, what application features we should try to standardize, or is there something in the old standards we might want to change a bit, and so on. But this is something that, the community is working together to make the standardized part of TETRA better, and this is a good base on which, then the applications themselves can be built, and also on which, the manufacturers can provide all kinds of innovative features on their terminals.
I suppose there is the argument that there are a number of users out there who actually do have terminals from different suppliers. I mean, are there issues in terms of having a short data application developed that really suits one terminal rather than the other? Do we see any issues in terms of particular users got a mixed terminal fleet? They develop a short data application that works really well on terminal X. Do we see issues with terminal Y as well, and how do we overcome those?
I think a typical situation is that if you look at a single organization, they typically have a single type of device. But if you are looking at applications that the operator would, for example, offer to all of their users, then the users have all kinds of terminals. And what we have seen in practical deployments is that you can provide applications so that you think about the information itself. Then you can provide it with short messages. You can provide it with WAP. You can provide it with Java client. You can provide it with other ways. So it actually allows everybody, regardless of the terminal, to use the best features on that terminal to access the information.
Barry, do you have any thoughts in terms of the standardization process and the positives it brings and the negatives it might also bring?
Well, yes. For example, the SDS is standardized, but like Hannu says, some applications work better on the other terminal than because of user interface or additions that there are on the terminal, which is good because of competition point of view. But sometimes it makes it more difficult, I think, for applications which are needed for multi-user and multi-manufacturer environments. And maybe there needs to be more work done to make this more equal.
Yeah. Okay. Just one of the things, it's picking up really on the question that Jeppe asked Hannu at the end in terms of, if you had the difference between an internet or intranet or 3G, GPRS, TETRA, in terms of safety critical, where to get the message through is very, very important. So if you've got a utility where you've got an electricity network and you've got a particular piece of equipment you want to switch off just like that, can we rely on TETRA to do that? Or do we have to think about various different ways of building applications to be time sensitive?
I think if you look at the different communications options available for these users, a TETRA network is the best option basically that can be had. Nothing is completely perfect, but if you look at what can be done, then this is the most sure solution to do that. And I think we have already a lot of experience from many countries, many organizations using TETRA, so we really know how well it works in critical situations. Sometimes we hear about stories, how it fails in a certain situation, but that's a known, so we know how to design the applications and other things for this. But if you look at this, using a private network, which is working in a proven standard, TETRA, is actually the best solution you can get.
Okay. Dick, have any thoughts in terms of, are there any limitations to using TETRA for applications?
I guess, again, of course, it's about how long's a piece of string, really. What sort of application are we talking about here? I mean, I think, obviously, probably the limitations to TETRA are the raw data speeds in some cases. But, there's an awful lot, say, you can do with TETRA. And, I think we shouldn't forget, as we said, the protocol is very secure. Generally, a TETRA network will be built to suit the application. So if it's an electricity network, it will have battery backup for 24 hours or something like that. So when you need to switch that breaker to actually energize electricity back on, it's going to work.
Yeah. So guaranteed throughput basically is the key
so,
message
yes,
there.
and a robust network.
Okay. If we just look forward a little bit towards evolving TETRA networks, do we see anything changing in terms of the way that data applications will be developed for the evolving TETRA networks, or potentially are we looking at using TETRA with other bearers for the new applications? And Hanno, what are you seeing in the applications working group where there are applications that are looking forward to TEDs or other?
I think if we look from the application users and application developers viewpoint, the application users, they want to use all the bandwidth and capacity they have to deliver the information they want. So we can do quite a lot with TETRA 1. And many people are looking for, TEDs. Okay, it will allow us to do a lot more. And then for some applications, video feeds or something like this, people are looking at other networks. But I think that's a kind of complementary thing. You can keep the really mission-critical communication still on TETRA. But it's true that the evil application developers will use all the bandwidth available. And this is actually a big concern for the operator. They want to control, how the different applications on the network are working, and that's kind of managing the network congestion is one of the topics we have been working on, so that we can actually say that, okay, you can deploy all these applications for all of these organizations on your network without having to worry about overloading the network.
Yeah, because it's interesting. One of my takeaways from your presentation, and it's something that we see quite a lot, is that smart apps don't need bandwidth. They just need proper developing for the actual underlying bearer that they're going to use. I mean, that's really quite a key point. Barry, what do you see happening in terms of applications for evolving TETRA networks?
I think, well, in the beginning, applications were made on a per question basis, and now application developers rely on the history and what they have made in the past, and now they start to have, let's say, a framework or a platform that can be easily adapted for the specific questions of the users. Like we started, I think there's no real killer application. It needs to be adapted, and now there are more platforms that are easily can be transformed to fulfill the questions of the users.
Nick, from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting few years ahead. I think we'll have to see what the uptake of TEDs is on some networks, but I think. And of course we have the argument about mission-critical and non-critical data, but I think there's going to be much more pressure for multi-bearer networks, some sort of multi-bearer solution maybe for non-critical, mission-critical data. Especially, when we see, there was a lot of talk this morning and yesterday about LTE and time frames of maybe up to 10 years. I don't think people are going to wait 10 years for an integrated solution. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, I think.
Okay, well, our 20 minutes is just about up. I want to give the last point to Hannu. I actually want him to just plug the Applications Working Group. I think it's very important that everybody understands exactly what the Applications Working Group does. So Hannu, in just 30 seconds, could you just sum up what your group does and the sorts of people who actually join it? So there might be people out there who don't know anything about it, who are interested and potentially could be useful participants.
Okay, so the Applications Working Group is part of the technical forum of the TETRA Association. And we actually bring together, we have users, operators, manufacturers, and application developers. And we work together trying to address some issues that we find and try to find solutions, for example, for network congestion and some security issues and so on. And I think this is the way to move forward. So in applications, we all have to work together because we need very closely, and then we can get the standardization going, we can get recommendations and other information. So I think that's the place to be.
Great. So if anybody wants to find out more, Hannu will be around for the next day or so, and by all means tag him. Can I just ask everybody please to show their appreciation to Hannu, Nick and Barry.